So next up we have Miss Sara Batterby. I met Sara through the fabulous Amanda Wilson, who connected me to Sara, saying we would get on because we were from the same part of the world. And then I had to remind her that I was Irish and Sara's actually English, and we have many centuries of enmity between us. But she also went to a nice Cheltenham Ladies College. We actually have two Cheltenham Ladies College graduates here. We have Prabha, who grew up in India and Singapore, who went to Cheltenham Ladies College, and Sara, which is kind of funny really, because it's sort of an obscure school. So Sara Batterby is up next, and you do not want to miss this session. This past summer, I took Sara's 8-week Capital Masterclass, and it is just an extraordinary experience. Several of the entrepreneurs who went on that journey with me are here today, and it's lovely to see our class back here together again. Sara works with quite a lot of entrepreneurs here in Portland, and she teaches them how to raise money, that really critical thing that we all need, right? Everybody needs to raise money. And having grown up in the UK, Sara came and worked in the States for a number of years as both a consultant and as a VC down in the Bay Area, and then she moved up to Portland a few years ago, and she was CEO of Hi-Fi Farms, one of Oregon's best-known cannabis brands, and she got that business off the ground and raised millions of dollars for that. But then she decided she would really actually prefer to work with people who don't traditionally have access to capital, people of color, women, LGBTQ, etc., etc. Did I say that right? Yay! You know what I'm talking about. And so I'm just going to hand over. Sara does a way better job of this than I do, so I'm just going to let her take it from here. Okay, so everybody welcome Sara Batterby and her Capital Masterclass.
Hey. It's so great to be here. My favorite thing is being in rooms full of women. It's just, from a business perspective, the way it feels right now to be in my professional network, the kind of people I'm working with, it's just, my life is packed with women. I gotta say, for me, I'm just like, I don't know, I feel like we're all channeling some like universal rage power. And I think it's a really exciting time to be a woman in business. So I have worked with a lot of people in this room, or spoke to you, or collaborated with you. There's a lot of people who are very sort of mission aligned around what I do in terms of supporting female entrepreneurs. And we've got a really great community of support here, and I really appreciate the panel, because it covered some of the stuff that I end up working through with founders, the more technical, tactical stuff, building a pro forma, understanding corporate structures, all of these things. But at the end of the day, the piece that I've learned that's really just one small piece of what is going on when you're raising capital. And the way I'm going to present this information today is a little bit different to what I've done in the past. And what I'm trying to do is honor the learning process that I've been on as I've worked with all of these women over this last year. I've only been doing this, it hasn't even been a year, it's been like 9 months, but I've been doing it for years. I've been mentoring women for years. I think I raised money for my first business when I was 27, so that was like 20 years ago. And I've done that lots of times, and I was very interested in women, the problems. I spent some time in Silicon Valley. I wouldn't recommend it unless you have to go down there to raise money, but I got my dream job after being years and years and years as a founder, some really great experience in startups. I started out in finance and technology. I worked for a big consulting firm, and then I went back into entrepreneurship. And I ended up getting my total dream job. I got offered to come in as a partner into a founding angel fund, a venture capital fund in Silicon Valley, and I was like, oh, I have arrived, you know? So I had spent the previous year gathering all of the data, and this didn't take long because there really wasn't much. But in around 2012, they started gathering the data on female performance in startups. And we just started to see the Kaufman Foundation, London School of Economics, and a few other organizations started publishing reports on some of the things that women were doing in startups that kind of were pretty impressive, and the data was amazing, right? It was like 35% better capital utilization in the first year after venture financing. If you guys don't know what capital utilization is, that means that if I gave you $1 and I gave that guy $1.35, you'd get the same amount of value creation out of that investment. So it's a big deal. Higher revenue run rates after venture financing, higher exit valuations. Like, there were these really amazing statistics that were coming out, and I was like, oh my God, everyone's gonna just turn around and start throwing money at women, right? That did not happen. And I got this job in Silicon Valley, and I just hated it. It was like, I couldn't understand why no one was using data as a way to invest. So we built what was my business part, my fund, other fund partners thought we were building a data-backed portfolio strategy, and I was like, we're building the women's business portfolio strategy. We built probably the first really comprehensive data-backed business case as a portfolio strategy for investing seed stage capital. And that was when I learned a lot about risk, investor mindset, the technical aspects of thinking through due diligence, raising money, thinking about how do you ask questions at the very beginning? How do you ascertain strengths and weaknesses very quickly? Because time's money, right? So when you're deploying capital, you've got to be able to pick at least the not losers, you know, out of the pack, and then filter them down. And if you're lucky at the end of the day, you'll maybe pick a couple of winners, but you've got to get pretty good at picking. So I learned a lot about that. Then I just couldn't handle Silicon Valley anymore, and I came up to Portland because it rains here. And that seemed really appealing at the time. So I moved here, and I immediately got back into entrepreneurship and started a cannabis company, not because I knew anything about cannabis or cared particularly about it. I never really used cannabis. And but it was because it was this just huge emerging market, super exciting, and all of these are phenomenally talented entrepreneurs, like tons of whom were women, just coming out of these gray and black markets into this opportunity that was just going to be this multi-billion-dollar marketplace really quickly. And it was fascinating, and I was like, this is so cool. So I very quickly built a company, raised a bunch of money, and did all of that. But one of the other things I did was I founded the Portland chapter of Women Grow, which was for diversity in the industry. And people started coming up to me and saying, how do you raise money? And I was like, I don't know. I never really thought about it. Like, how do you do anything? You just do it. Like, I'd done it. I'd always done it. But I'd never thought about it, and I'd never answered that question. And then, because people kept asking me, I started to support people in doing it and advise people, and I had to think about what I was doing. And in the process of thinking about what I was doing, I realized that I was doing things that were quite different to what I was hearing and what I had heard in Silicon Valley and like the baller rule book for raising money, which I gotta say, I don't think it works. But and that's when I got super interested in this, and I realized that my interest in codifying raising money came from working with a community of entrepreneurs who didn't traditionally have access to capital. But it wasn't because they were women or people of color or any of those things. It was because they were coming out of a prohibition, right? But when I started to realize this whole access to capital thing was, first of all, it wasn't, it's a massive issue, and all kinds of people don't have access to capital. I just happen to enjoy working with women, but it has a lot to do with our social and cultural status and all the rest of it. So what I've been doing is I've been on this 9-month journey of just focusing on this absolutely all the time. And I'm in this really intense learning process around what's really going on and what's really true and what really isn't and what works and what doesn't. And so as a result of that, it's all kind of moving around in my head. So if I'm a little all over the place today, you'll just bear with me. I feel like we're in a happy, safe place. I can experiment a little bit and trust you guys. All right, raising money for your startup. So we kind of did this already. Okay. So why fundraising sucks? And everyone, by the way, I work with entrepreneurs. I also work with venture capital funds. I work with fund managers because they hate fundraising too, by the way. And they mostly suck at it. And I think fundraising has outgrown what fundraising has always been, right? And fundraising, the way we're trying to fundraise is still based on this one completely outdated assumption. And that is that the person raising money belongs to this completely familiar and homogenous network where money just naturally gets kind of passed around. Let's just call it the golf club, right? And that's not true anymore. And that's not true of entrepreneurs. And interestingly enough, that's not true of venture capitalists either, or of fund managers. The largest fund I'm raising right now is a $330 million fund being raised by a woman who is phenomenally professionally competent, connected, talented, has never raised money before, right? So it doesn't matter that she's got privilege coming out of her ears. She's having exactly the same experience trying to raise money as a founder who I might work with who's, you know, in their late 20s, starting a company for the first time, totally intimidated by the whole thing, and it's a black box and very mysterious. So you just can't generalize about people's experience around this. But the reason fundraising sucks is because a whole bunch of people are trying to do it who don't belong to the golf club. And they're trying to do it in the way that people have done it forever at the golf club, which is through a whole bunch of personal referrals that are already a part of very familiar, trust-based relationships that people recognize and understand. And if somebody sends Billy over to tell you about his business, and with a sort of nudge, give him $100 grand, you're gonna do it because he's part of the golf club, right? So the problem with that is that those are inaccessible networks to most of us. Now, there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing like essentially wrong with the golf club. It's just that most of us aren't in it, right? And now we're in an environment where all different kinds of people are raising money, starting companies, and it's important that those people get to participate in entrepreneurship, in the economy, in success, in access to capital. So as a result, we've got this total mismatch between a process and a community of people who are trying to execute around this task. And this is one of the other really critical problems about this, is that we still are not talking about fundraising like it's a skill set. We've got this kind of like, it's who you know, not what you know thing going on, right? And that's not true either. Fundraising is a skill set. We talked about, it came up a little bit on the panel previous to this, understanding these basic fundamental tools, understanding this transaction. I mean, would you go to the market with a handful of bills in a currency that you didn't understand, speaking a language you didn't speak, and like point at what you want, be like, I want that, let's say tomatoes, and just trust the guy behind the counter to take the right number of bills out of your hand? How much are they? Sorry, I don't. That's what people do fundraising. They feel, and if you're wondering why that's intimidating, well, I wouldn't want to go to the market and buy tomatoes in those conditions, never mind put the control and ownership and the future of my company on the line. So of course it's intimidating. It's intimidating because in addition to the fact that we have no idea what we're doing, because it's not taught like a skill set or treated like a skill set, you will not learn about fundraising if you go get an MBA. Is that crazy? In addition to that, there's this huge misattribution of these two critical elements within any transaction, and one of them is power and the other one is scarcity. Scarcity is the first rule of economics. And if you walk around feeling like Oliver Twist with your hands out, without understanding this basic concept that there's one of you and lots of them, and being able to really absorb that and hold value around your position as a well-validated opportunity for an investor, you're going to have a hard time being in that transaction. And the other thing is power. And I talk about power, yeah, there's like power, you know, but power is an element of any transaction. And power isn't just who's got the money, right? Power is who has the information, who has the status, who has the assumed power. And what we do as founders often is we give away or we misattribute power. And we give all of the sort of experience of power to the person on the other side of the transaction. And that's a problem because if you know anything about, like, I don't know, the universe strives for equilibrium, right? Value-based transactions that really recognize the value of the thing that's being exchanged, they can only happen on a level playing field that appropriately recognizes the distribution, the equal distribution of power between the buyer and the seller. And if the playing field looks like this, and that's an investor and he's powerful or important because he's rich, or you think he's rich, and you're down here and you're intimidated and nervous because we've been taught that rich people are somehow better than us, somehow, or more important, or busier. No, if that's true, then there's no way that an appropriate transaction can occur. The only thing that occurs within this relationship is some form of subtle exploitation, because you can't transact without having a level playing field. So that's why fundraising sucks. It sounds awful, right? God, it is. I mean, it's awful and most people hate it. I love it. I do, because, you know, when you figure some of this stuff out and you get rid of some of the I call it funding folklore, this like mythology that lives around fundraising, when you get rid of some of that and you realize that you're just doing a deal, you know, you can actually take back your power and all the rest of it. It's suddenly, it's kind of fun, you know, it gets to be a game. And I know I've made it with I advise a lot of people and I work with a lot of people, and I know that when they get to a point where they're like, oh, yeah, this is kind of fun. I'm like, yes, let's go raise some money. I think what has to be acknowledged, and one of the things that I've done in fundraising that I think is a little bit different, is I absolutely recognize the need for competence, skills. You have to understand what a capitalization table is. You do have to be able to build a competent pro forma, understand your assumptions. There's all of these things that you will learn. But what also has to be acknowledged is for most people who haven't traditionally had access to capital, there's two bodies of work that have to be accomplished for you to raise money successfully. And one of them is tactical. And it's all of anything that's tactical means you can break it down into tasks, right? So it's all the task-based stuff. It's the work that you have to do in your business. The other piece is emotional. And I've got so many names for this, and I think about it constantly, because what I've realized I'm doing as I'm working through all of these engagements with all of these amazing women is I realize that all of the tactical work is ultimately servicing this shift in identity that needs to happen for us to be effective fundraising. Because what we actually have a deficiency of is entitlement. What we're actually short on isn't even, I don't think we necessarily even have an access to capital problem. I think we have an access to, that's my money problem. I think we have an entitlement problem. And so what I'm trying to teach is entitlement, but you can't just show up and someone comes to me and they're like, I need to raise money. And I'm like, let's sit down and talk about your identity. And they're like, no, I need to raise money. And I'm like, yeah, but let's talk about how you feel about things. Like, no, I would never, no one would ever hire me if I did that, right? So I don't do that. I recognize, and I started off doing this as skills training, and I recognize that the skills are super, super important. But the thing I also have learned and understand, and there's a lot of information and data about this, is that women And men are different in one very important way. Guys, by the way, they don't know anything about fundraising either. They don't, but they do not have an entitlement problem. So you can know nothing about fundraising, walk around with a very clear sense of entitlement and be extremely successful raising money, or you can know everything about fundraising, have an entitlement deficiency, and fail completely to raise money. So clearly, the skills training is not the most important thing going on here, right? Because you don't actually need it. But because you're women and because you've been locked out of the golf club for the last 3,000 years, I'm just going to assume that there's, some catch-up to do on the entitlement end of things, and we work on that. But the way that we do it is, it was either like 6 years of therapy or a whole bunch of skills training so that you could at least feel competent, and then you have that as a foundation for a new degree of confidence in approaching a task that feels really unfamiliar, right? So we do a lot of work around skills, strategies, language, all of the tools that you need to basically feel like you know what you're doing and know what you're talking about, because women, when they feel competent, are pretty much unstoppable. And in most of the women that I work with, there's always one thing. It's like there's the key to the kingdom. And I don't know, with some women it's like building an assumptions framework for their pro forma, and with some women it's understanding the shares and the transaction, understanding the currency, right? With some women it's understanding control and the cap table, because we all have these fears that we don't know what we're doing and somebody's going to take our company away from us. And using these building blocks basically build this experience of confidence and competence, and we also fake it. We build a framework that sort of fakes a redistribution of power and control and puts it back into your ballpark. So when you look at this list, when you think about personal, we talk about mindset, confidence, leveling the playing field, value, credibility, engagement, and momentum. I would describe those as things you have to sort of experience to be successful fundraising. And then how those translate into tactical skills is like understanding the investor mindset, like what's the real truth about the person, let's call him the guy, because he probably is one, on the other side of the table. Competence, how do you establish competence with that person? How do you take leadership? How do you take control of a fundraising process? Valuation, what's that about, creating a competent investment package and effective communication so that you can move everyone through to a close. So the first thing on that list was the investor mindset, and this is where like the funding folklore comes in, because let's think about this. Most seed stage investors are angels, right? Angel investors, which means like, you've got to think of them as like, you've got to really appreciate them, because what they're doing is very foolish. They are not qualified to be investing in your company. The chances they are not a domain expert in your industry. They do not understand, if you're doing anything innovative, then it's already new and unfamiliar, right? The chances are they're a man, just because there are a lot of, and we definitely have an amazing rush of new types of investors with new investment theses coming into the market, but the majority of investors are guys still. So you're a complete unknown quantity, okay? These people are benevolent fools, and we have to appreciate them, but we also have to understand that they're not more smarter, richer, busier, more important than you. They're not any of those things. They're people that you need to educate, nurture, support, realize that they're locked in a highly status-based activity that's not allowed in our culture for them to be like, ooh, I kind of don't understand your pro forma. Ooh, I'm feeling a little anxious about the fact that I don't understand this industry. Like, they're not going to say any of that. They're going to pretend to be busy, important, all of the other things, right? Like, these are the rules. Like, we've got to understand the rules. And so the mindset on the other side of the table is you have someone who isn't allowed to sort of be vulnerable, who kind of doesn't know what they're doing, and there's all kinds of fear and anxiety on that side of the table. The minute you get that, you're like, oh, I'm not the only one who's over here feeling freaked out by this whole thing. right? You've got an unfamiliar transaction. You're dealing with unfamiliar parties. When you know that, what you're actually doing is you're redistributing the anxiety present in any transaction equally through the transaction, and you can empathize with the person on the other side of the transaction. I mean, we heard on the panel that phrase, investing in founders, looking for founders. We're picking founders. Well, what do you think that means? It means that these are basically relationship-based transactions. So what is it your job to do? Impress somebody or build a relationship with them by acknowledging the opportunity to craft an empathetic connection with someone who's just like you, but with a different set of problems to solve on the other side of a transaction. And it's your job as the expert to understand the transaction, to understand what this person needs in order to get to trust, familiarity, confidence, excitement, engagement, right? That's your job. And once you're able to do that and assume that responsibility, you're back to being a CEO. And you guys are good at that because you're entrepreneurs, right? You're never going to succeed in a system that forces you to be to cede all of the control to the other side of the table. If you're anything like me, you're a total control freak. I mean, it's totally intolerable. I think the reason I got good at this is that I'm such a control freak that I couldn't handle it. And I was like, I have to figure out a way to be in control of this transaction. And by being in control of the transaction, you are able to acknowledge all the vulnerability and need for support on the other side and get investors to where they need to be so that they feel safe. This is what we're doing. We're making them feel safe. Risk is danger. You have to get them to feel safe. So take your nurturing, wonderful, educative, communicative, chatty selves and apply that in the process that you use to work with investors through a due diligence process. So yeah, this is just a little bit more about, another thing that's really important to understand about investors, and whether this is a VC sitting in an office or someone heading up an angel group, is angel investing usually is what people do with this tiny little piece of money that their CPA told them that they could afford to lose, right? And if they do lose it, by the way, they just write it off on their taxes. So there's actually no such thing as losing money if you're an angel investor. So there is if you're a fund. Sorry, ladies, I know that you don't want me to say that, I love it. And so this isn't usually even really a financial transaction. Usually people are doing this because they're excited in a new industry, interested in participating and being involved in an entrepreneurial endeavor. Maybe they spent their life as a doctor or an attorney and they miss out on the opportunity to be an entrepreneur and they want to feel connected to that energy. There's usually an emotional subplot for why people make these early stage investments. And it has something to do with a relationship, it has something to do with what it is you're doing or how you're doing it, or some memory from their past. And as women, we're really super good at attuning to people. And if you can attune to investors and understand that there's a financial transaction here and it's important to be sort of responsible around that, but there's probably something else going on. And if you can figure out what that is, you can start thinking through how do you, if you're going to think about a return on an investment, but money isn't the only thing that's being invested, there's like hopes, dreams, regrets, nostalgia, like all of these other things. How do you return on those things? And it's important because people are looking for these connections in the way that they deploy this kind of really early stage capital. So the other thing we talked about was confidence and transactional competence, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, and I know that this came up, and this is a place where you guys benefit so much from the support of any kind of accelerator efforts or incubators. Get yourself a mentor, get yourself some guidance, because transactional competence is critical. It's going to put you on a really firm footing to have these conversations. It's going to give you the opportunity to understand your investment documents, what's the safe agreement, what's the convertible note. You need to know this. You would not expect you would not expect any part of your business to go very well if you didn't learn about it or bring a skill set into your company that was relevant to supporting it. So your transactional competence basically breaks down to your corporate structures and shares. Shares are currency. They're the thing you're exchanging for money. So you've got to understand how they work in corporations and LLCs and what that means. Your capitalization table is really just a little calculator that shows you the transaction dynamic. As you issue out equities, shares, units in your company, what happens to the ownership percentages relative to the number of shares and all of these things. There's this thing called dilution. Everyone seems to hate it, but it's actually great. I don't know why people have a problem with it, but cap tables, if you can create a simple model for your cap table, and you can understand dilution, and you can understand these share structures, you're going to feel very, very much in command of the thing that defines control in your company, which is ownership and all the rest of it. You're going to be able to think through governance. How much of your company do you want to give to get the really best board of directors, the really best board of advisors that you can have? Because those people will make a huge difference. Like, they're as important to your company as money. Your pro forma financials, we talked about that, your investment documents, and your presentation and pitch. And when I say presentation, I'm talking about your executive summary, business plan, whatever you're using to create the sort of textual narrative around your business. I can't remember the last time I even saw a business plan. If you're stuck behind a business plan, move on. Just don't write one. Like, nobody reads them. I never use them. You need an executive summary that's extended, like 8 to 12 pages, really good pro forma. You need to be able to understand, and if you're pitching, that's great, but you've got to understand pitching is performance art. It is a great opportunity to start relationships with investors, and that's the purpose of pitching, is to get people to walk up to you after you pitched and ask you a question. That is the only thing you're doing up there. So slow it all down. It's great to have a good pitch deck. It's a great way. I was always telling people, don't bother with that. And then I realized that there are kinds of people who are just visual learners out there, and if they didn't have one, they just couldn't get their head straight around anything else. So I'm like, do whatever you need to do, but understand that that's not really fundraising. Fundraising is happening in the way that you build relationships. So this is what we do. All of the problems in fundraising can really be boiled down to a very simple, I'll give you one example of something that goes wrong in fundraising, and it goes wrong right at the very beginning, and then everything after that sucks. So let's say that you've done a great job, you've put together your investment package, you've got your materials, you've got your business, you really thought about it, you're really excited, you decided you're going to start raising money. So you start talking to people about it at events, you start sort of socializing your raise. So imagine your conversation, you meet someone, they're like, oh, this is great. Well, tell me a little about what you're doing. Oh my goodness, I'm building this really exciting company. I do X, Y, Z. That's great. How's it going? Well, interesting you should ask. I'm in the process of preparing to open a raise. I'm gonna be raising money. I'm super excited about it. Wow, this is great. I love it. I love what you're doing. You seem great. Why don't you send me your stuff? So you're like, oh my God, yeah. So you run home and package it all up and attach it to an email and send it. Anyone familiar with this experience? Right, it's awful, right? Because what happens next? Nothing. Yeah. Well, think about it. The sending me your stuff thing works at the golf club because you're already familiar, there's already a relationship there. There's already social capital invested in being reliable, responsive, all of these things. None of that stuff is there when you've just met someone for 5 minutes or you're being referred through someone's network to somebody who doesn't know you. None of that stuff is there. Not only that, you've just dropped 35 pages of reading into their inbox, but you don't know them. Now, that person was probably genuinely interested in what you're doing, genuinely wanted to understand more about it, genuinely wanted to get to know you better as a founder, but what you just did was you dumped a huge amount of work onto a very tentative connection, and you're on one side of that feeling anxious and wondering if they're going to get back to you, and then on the other side of it, feeling at first mildly guilty. They're not going to stay feeling like that for long, because that's not how you type the person on the other side of an investment. They're going to be annoyed, and what's going to happen is the relationship's going to break, and you're going to get ghosted, which is what it's called when they don't get back to you, and it happens all the time. And that is the most common transactional element of any fundraising scenario, and it does not work, ever. It does occasionally, but it really just doesn't work, and everybody does it all of the time. So let's just assume we're not going to do that. In fact, if any of you are writing things down, write this down. Never, ever attach any information about your company to an email, period. That's it. That's the number one rule of fundraising, right? So, okay, what do you do as an alternative? Well, remember, what you're trying to do is take control back of a process, establish yourself as a professional, be a leader, manage a process that's critical to your company. You need to take things back and level the playing field and get rid of these stupid ideas we have about power and who's important. So let's try it again. You're at an event. Oh yeah, it's great. That's amazing. What you're doing is so interesting. Tell me about it. Oh, wonderful. That sounds great. Why don't you send me your stuff? And you're like, well, actually, what I like to do is spend a little bit of time getting to know people. I'm in the process of qualifying investors into my raise. And maybe we could spend a little bit of time. You can learn a little bit about my company. I would like to know a little bit more about you. And if it seems like we're a fit, I'd be delighted to invite you into my due diligence process when I open my raise. Right. So 1,000 things just happened psychologically on both sides of this conversation, right? The investor is like, oh. And they're making up their mind whether to be pissed or impressed, is mostly what. They're like, did you just say no? Is that a no? And it is a no, so it's rejection. That's what you just did. You rejected their request. The dark arts of fundraising are rejection, scarcity, and fear, but we'll talk about that maybe another time. So you say no, and you establish a boundary around process and control, right? Yeah, so it sounds like, well, the rules, yeah, I haven't read that book, but people keep telling me that it's just the same. So anyway, on your side, this is your first flag in the ground of like ownership and control of this very important process. And so now you have immediately, if you have not reset, if you have not leveled the playing field, you're 80% of the way there in just this one conversation. Because the bottom line is if the person on the other side of the line is there for the experience of having you kiss up to them, chase them around, act like they're more important than you, they will self-select out of this immediately. And you will not have to deal with them, and it will save you so much time, because I can't tell you how many people are out there, literally, that's what they're transacting for, is the experience of having a whole bunch of beautiful young women, frankly, chasing around after them. Or just women. I mean, it's crazy, right? So let's get rid of those people immediately by saying, no, we're going to do this my way, and if you don't want to do it my way, you're not going to do it. And it's as simple as that. So now you're a professional, and you're on a level playing field. They still need to see your stuff, though, right? How do you do that? Again, you establish some controls. You build out your investment package in a shareable framework, whether it's Google Drive or Box or one of these things. I hate Dropbox, but whatever works for you. And you basically go through the process of qualifying a group of investors, and then at the time of your choosing, when you feel like you're prepared and you're ready, you open up your raise and you invite those people who you've qualified into that environment so that they can do their due diligence in their own time, or not, because frankly most of them don't do due diligence. They decide whether they like you or not, and then they send all your stuff to their lawyer. And that's how a lot of the investments happen, right? That's not true when you're working with the funds and the professional investors, but with the angels it's definitely true. So to be qualified into your cohort, we call this cohort capital. This is like where you pull investors together as a group. Investors hate being alone. They hate feeling like they're the only person looking at your deal. So put them in a group and say to them, if you let them know that to participate in your due diligence process, they need to do two things. They need to explicitly express interest in your company, in being invited into your process. And they also need to agree that to allow you to run an efficient and professional process, which means you will communicate with them. The people who are invited in, you're going to be communicating with them as a group during the period leading up to opening the raise and during due diligence. Now, there's a securities law requirement here. You have an obligation to have all investors have access to the same information at the same time when you have a securities offering in the market. You can't do that if you're dealing with version control, emailing individually across multiple relationships. It's frankly impossible, and it will ruin your life anyway because it sucks. These people need to understand that you're gathering a group of people together. It's your job to do that. You're going to generate a lot of interest in this opportunity, and then you're going to organize a process. And to a certain degree, they're just going to be treated like someone in this group. And if they're concerned about privacy and they don't want people to see their email, just stick them in the BCC line. But there's no divergence from this. These are the rules, right? So they can only come in through the front gate. They can't forward, download, share. They can't do anything with these documents except stare at them on their computer screen. And if they want someone else to come into the raise and look at this stuff, they have to make an introduction to you, and that person has to come through your process. By creating these systems, you're sending really strong and clear signals that you're a leader, you're a professional, you're managing a process, you're gathering interest around the raise. And not only that, but if you put a bunch of alpha people around a conference table and you stick a pie in the middle of it, and then you keep inviting people in and sitting them down around the same table, you know, when there's 3 people around the table, it's going to be like, pie, you know. 5 people, I wonder if there's going to be, is that a big enough pie? 7 people, I'm ready for my pie now. Are you gonna, I'll take my pie now, right? Like, these people are competitive. They're investors because they're competitive. They compete around scarce resources. They're about deals. And if they see a deal with like 15 investors around it, and you're raising $800,000, you have too many investors. And if you do a good enough job throughout that process of working through an engagement strategy and a communication strategy that features you as a professional, an expert in your industry, an expert in your own business, gives them the opportunity to not have to deal with you in presentation mode or even a presentation. But remember, you're unfamiliar. You're not at the golf club. They can't make assumptions about who you are and how you do things. So it's more important for them to see how you function as a manager than it is for them to understand your pitch deck. Because the presentation is not going to solve any of their problems about risk. Because it's a total misrepresentation of reality, and we all know that, right? They're just glossiness. They need to see you operate as a manager, as a leader, as someone who solves problems. I have an amazing founder that I work with. She did this thing that I thought was so genius. She was sending one of the updates to her cohort, which is her group of investors, in her due diligence process. Her raise is open. And she started doing this thing, and at the bottom of every email, she would write down the thing that she was having the toughest time with right now. Like the challenge that she was having that week or whatever. I was just like, that's so genius. Like creating this like openness and vulnerability and transparency, and then coming back a week later and being like, hey, this is how I solved that problem. It elicits a kind of engagement and a degree of engagement and trust that you need to have, because what you're doing is you're replicating in a concise amount of time what actually happens in a natural capital network where people just are already familiar, comfortable, all the same. They can make assumptions and feel safe around one another. But if you're dealing with investors, and this isn't investors' fault, it's all strange, it's a strange new world, right? All these different kinds of people doing all these different kinds of things from all different kinds of backgrounds. So if we can all understand that we've still got to go through this process of like getting to know each other so that we can participate in what's essentially a trust-based transaction, then my question is, how do we do that faster? How do we speed that up? And these strategies are designed to organize and speed up the process that allows you to build your own professional capital network around whatever it is you're doing. And I'll tell you something, that I have pretty detailed technical, tactical, and strategic understanding of fundraising, and I'm good at it. I enjoy doing it. But once I'm sitting across the table from someone, and let's say it's a middle-aged white guy, just because that's, it often is, but let's say it is, once that person on the other side of the table knows that I'm there to transact and I'm doing a deal, and recognizes me as a deal maker and not just some strange creature from another planet, right? The whole gender thing kind of goes away. Like, if you're recognizable to those guys as someone who's there to do business and do a deal, they will treat you like someone who's there to do a deal, because they shift into their, like, deal thing. And if you know how to play that game, like it's really kind of a game, you can be super, super effective managing the dynamics of these kind of conversations to your advantage. So I think I jumped ahead and jumped around. Oh, valuation. I use the term valuation because it's really important, and people ask me questions about it because I think people have anxiety about understanding it and not understanding it. The bottom line is there's lots and lots of different methodologies for valuing companies. They're different depending on what sector or industry you're in. There's certain norms in different industries and all the rest of it, and all of that's important. And it has to be embedded in the disciplines of understanding valuation and your pro forma and your, future, how much traction you've got behind you and how much revenue you've got in front of you and all of that stuff. But the real truth about valuation in a seed stage company is your ability to hold your own value is ultimately going to play an outsized role in the valuation that you can defend for your company. Which is, again, it's why, is it important to have the pro forma? Yes. But are those numbers on that piece of paper, one, going to tell you anything about the future? Thank you, Renee. No, they're not. And secondly, do they really meaningfully tell the story of your valuation? Not really. Your valuation, I always describe it as it's as big a bat as you think you can swing. And swinging a bat has everything to do with where you are on value on the inside and the extent to which you've done a good job recognizing that equality is identity, right? Entitlement is identity. Like, what we have to get our hands on is the feeling that we belong in that room and in that conversation, and that is our money, because our performance is better across so many metrics. And if we want these investors to succeed with their goals, then we have to show them that we're the people they need to be giving their money to. It's better for them to invest in us. And we have to believe that and know that. We have to carry that around inside us. And that has to play a role in how we think through valuation and represent valuation in our company. That can't be the only thing you know about valuation, because you're going to get tripped up pretty hilariously in conversations with investors, but it's the most important thing to know about it, is that it's your ability to hold value around what it is you're doing and your right to be there doing it. So credibility, again, is sort of like goes to value. Your investment package is going to be the thing that gives you credibility, but what it's going to be is the place that investors go to check that you're not crazy, right? And that you've done the work, and that you're an expert, and that you've looked at the details and asked the questions. You've challenged yourself. So your investment package and all the documents that are in there are where you'll get the credibility. And again, what we're talking about is like these experiences on both sides of the line. Like, you have to feel credible, and an investor has to believe you and be able to verify with some other thing than just the experience of being around you and seeing your progress, that there's discipline and business applied to what it is you're offering. And then the engagement strategy. So the way it works, just to give you a super quick chronology. So the way I teach fundraising is I basically say, okay, there's going to be a period during which you're preparing to open your raise. And that is when we build all the materials in our investment package. During that period, you're going to be building your cohort, which means you're going to be gathering that group of people who are interested in being invited into your due diligence process. Remember, you're not qualifying them for money at this point. They might be connectors, they might be investors, but the bottom line is they're excited about your company, they're your people, they're interested in what you're doing, and they want to be around it in some way, right? Then you have a date and time. You're going to open your raise. That's the day, you start your communication strategy. You do that before you open the raise. You start giving these people updates, letting them know what's going on. Do not bomb them. Do not send them long emails. And do not give them anything to do. Most investors have this defensive reaction every time you show up in their email inbox because they're waiting for you to ask them for money. And we all know how that feels. It sucks, both sides of the line. It's not fun asking for money, and it's not fun being asked for money. So you've got to get people off the defensive. And the way to do that is have a period of time in a relationship with them where you don't ask them to do anything, and you don't ask them for money. You don't talk about money. In fact, you don't even spend much time talking about your company. You've done all this work, all of those materials. If they want to look at the details and ask you questions, then they can go do their due diligence. They're grown-ups. It's none of your business if they decide they want to do that or not. It's their risk. That's their job as an investor. Your job as a founder is to run your company competently and give them an opportunity to see you doing that. And you do that by keeping them updated in this communication strategy. So there's a period of time, now your raise is open, you're continuing to add people into the cohort. You're continuing to add people, and so maybe you start your email with, hey, welcome to those of you who are here for the first time. So this is what happened last week, XYZ. Obviously, you're gliding across the pond, but you're paddling like crazy underneath because you're actively fundraising, and you've timed this so that you're going to hit certain milestones while you have a raise open so that you can have impressive things and really show execution as you go through this process. Because there's nothing safer than a founder who's just going to execute consistently over time. And so you have this, and then you're basically tapping on this needle in your cohort. You're increasing the number of investors in this group. You're building confidence in the group, and so what happens is organically people within the group start reaching out and pulling their people in, pulling in other investors. And then as you move along, you're sort of taking the temperature of the group, and then you're coming up with your strategy on how you're going to start to gather commitments and move people towards a capital close. But you never ask for money. Asking for money is not a part of this process. Like, there is a point at which you call people up just to confirm the size of their commitment and their liquidity. I'm just calling to see how much you're in for and verify that there's nothing I need to know about when you'll be able to deliver that capital. Because I can't tell you how many people are like, oh, I got to wrap up my divorce, or oh, I'm selling my house. Like, just make sure that you know. So interestingly enough, if you've had someone in this process of engagement, like from a month, a couple of weeks before you opened your raise has been open for 6 weeks, so you've got 2 months, you're in this process. They have full access to all of the information, and you're constantly reinforcing the fact that you're available to answer any questions, if they have any concerns, anything came up in due diligence. And the bottom line is if they haven't asked you any questions and they haven't expressed any concerns, then you're just going to go ahead and assume that they're going to give you some money. So you just need to know how much it is and when they're going to give it to you. And if you're able to sort of perform this beautifully orchestrated ballet perfectly, what happens is you just end up with a lot of momentum and energy within this process, and increasing engagement that is fueled by these investors who are being validated within a community of their peers, because they're not alone in this process. They're in this group, and are going to essentially, potentially even start to compete with each other, because it's going to seem like you did a really great job building interest around your company, and now there might not be room on your cap table for all of these guys, and then you can start to think about how to effectively close capital on a schedule. And so, in my world, That's kind of how fundraising works. And it's a little different, and it's not, and there's portions of it that, feel mildly manipulative, and there's portions of it that simply acknowledge certain truths. And what's important to me is that as women, we're able to do this thing in a way that's authentically ourselves, while understanding that we're playing into a framework of language, rules, systems that we need to be savvy about if we're going to be successful. And so what I've learned is that the skills training happens really fast, and the identity shift happens a lot more slowly. But what I found most inspirational in this entire process was this thing that happens that I did not prepare women that I was working for because I hadn't kind of put it together what it was. But what I realized is that by creating these guardrails around your raise and your materials, creating this way into your raise, locking it down, creating this schedule, being in control, what you're basically doing is you're shifting a very well-established balance of power, a balance of power that's pretty much taken for granted in this kind of transaction. And what's happening on the other side of the line is disempowerment. Now it's disempowerment towards something that looks closer to equity, but it is disempowerment nonetheless. And when you disempower people who are used to experiencing an unquestioned amount of power, what they don't do is be like, oh, I'm feeling a little anxious, just feeling like things are a little different, and it makes me feel a little scared. That doesn't happen, right? No. What will happen is guys who feel a little confused, and I can tell, because I see this happen over and over again, I can tell that they haven't kind of pieced it together. A lot of this stuff's happening subconsciously, right? So they'll kind of act out a little. They'll become a little bullying or critical. They'll be like, well, I can't believe you would put this in here and not have this done like this, or I think that your valuation, or they'll just come out with they'll make up some objection, and they'll just be kind of bullying and a little bit shitty. They'll get shitty. And I'm like, oh, look at that. And the founders invariably have a meltdown and immediately want to be like, I've got to change everything. I can't believe you put me out there. I feel like an idiot. He thinks I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm like, stop. Remember, we have designed this system to do this thing. And if someone's misbehaving on the other side of the line, it's because it's working. And what you need to do, and if all you can do is just sit there and don't do anything, at least until tomorrow when you've had a chance to calm down. Because it's frightening. People want to suddenly start jumping back through all the hoops and giving back all the power and making everyone feel comfortable. I'm like, just hold the line. Hold the line. And when founders are able to, and I said, listen, just try to understand that they're just experiencing fear and disempowerment and anxiety, and they're just behaving badly, and they'll stop it. Just give them a minute and don't react. Be professional, responsive. Let me see what I can do to adjust. Let me see if there's a way I can support getting you what you need. But don't do anything different. Just hold that line. This is still how you're doing it, and it's there. Invariably, within 24 hours, you get the email, oh, you know what, I was looking at the wrong document, or, oh, I found what I needed over here, or, oh, it's not an apology, but it's like a person being like, all right, I spazzed out, and now I'm used to the new world order, and I'm going to be okay, right? If a founder can hold that line while maintaining an empathetic connection with the experience that the person is having on the other side of the disempowerment, that's when the identity shift happens. It doesn't happen when we get in a room with each other and scream and howl and cry and hurt because of all the shit that we have put up with. And I have had a lot of it, and I'm sure a lot of you have too. We will only change in a relationship that connects us with and carries us through an action that actually shifts the power, shifts the way it works. And if we can hold our space as we get bullied, which you can see a whole bunch of men freaking out right now, and yeah, that's gonna happen. But if we can empathize and hold space and hold power and hold our value, then we will change and we will be able to fulfill. We will be able to experience the entitlement that we have to feel if we're going to be successful. Raising capital, building companies, taking our place in this economy and in this world. And the people on the other side of the line will have the support that they need to get through the experience of being disempowered, which is what is going to happen to them. And that is scary, right? So that is what I have learned as a function of supporting women in raising capital. And whew, I mean, life changer, right? Like, it blows my mind every day, the work that I do and watching these people transform. And some of the things that the women that have had this sort of like internal evolution, some of the things that they're doing now in the world. A Mexican-American woman who came to me a year ago, she wanted to raise $2.2 million for a cannabis company in California. She's from Oakland, and her entire team is every imaginable version of like every representation of like diversity across gender and race and all these, socioeconomic backgrounds, the whole thing. These are people that typically would not show up totally on Sand Hill Road looking for millions of dollars, right? She raised that money. She was oversubscribed by $6 million. She's just about to let the world know that she just closed a $50 million fund to invest in equity participants in the cannabis industry. Yeah, amazing. She came to me, she's like, I don't know anything I don't know how to raise money, can you help me? I'm scared to death of doing it. And that's what she just did. A year later, she's blowing my mind. I mean, I'm like, oh my God, you're better than this than anyone I've ever met in my entire life. It's really great. So hopefully there's something in there that was like useful in terms of like walking out the door and knowing how to do something a little bit differently. The whole don't email people stuff, do that and don't do that, you know? And other than that, I really appreciate the opportunity to sort of share a little more deeply, as it were, some of the things that I've learned about what's really going on with this whole access to capital thing. And thank you so much, and I'd be delighted if you have any questions. Yeah, hey.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. I'm entirely new to the concept. So my just practical understanding of the story that you told is that a lot of what you said hinges on that no. But how do you balance that with also asking, right? How do you create that sense of scarcity or that power for yourself while also seeking? That's the one thing I can't remember.
So there's this saying that I hate, and it isn't true, and it is true. Like, people will tell you that fundraising is a numbers game. I hate that because it kind of doesn't work with the whole relationship building thing. But at the end of the day, you do have to be out there generating a lot of activity around your raise, which means you have to be proactively seeking opportunities to connect with investors, invite people into the process, asking investors to connect you with other investors, building the relationships. You can ask for things in relationships once you've done a good job building the relationship, right? So you'll create, this is the one area where it's really hard to describe it, but it's kind of a trust thing for me at this point because I've seen it happen so many times. But the process generates its own momentum. And if you can establish momentum and you keep feeding your attention and energy into it, it will generate energy and momentum of its own. And once you are in a process that has some momentum and you have an opportunity that you have a lot of interest gathered around, it becomes less about asking for money than it does about keeping people on a schedule that makes it clear when you're going to do things like firm up commitments and then start thinking about calling capital. Is that helpful?
So it sounds like the first step, though, is to get even in a place where you can say no. You have to do some work to get to that.
Yeah, and I mean, saying no is really just saying, like, no, I'm going to do it my way. Like, yeah. But where you'll end up if you really just get to, like, really hold the reins is you'll end up saying no to the kind of money you don't want. And that's when you really start to feel powerful, is you're like, you know what? I just don't like you. I don't want your money. You're going to be a pain in my ass. And a bad investor who's a pain in your ass will ruin your day and can certainly damage your company.
Can you talk about when you take investment, the things that you give up in terms of like, or that you're negotiating for, things like board member positions, approval of higher equity in the company?
Yeah. So I use the cap table to make pretty much every single decision I make in relation to raising capital. What I tell founders is if you're raising seed stage capital, I just have a quota for everything. Okay, seed stage capital, ideally somewhere between 10 and 15% of your equity, not more than 20%. So first of all, I sort of make these rules and then I try to stick with them. And there's always cases in which you have to flex. Board members, I'm like, I'm going to put 5% of my company towards getting exceptional talent on the advisory and board level over the next 5 years. And I think of it as a part of the investment pool. Bringing in executive talent onto a founding team, that's like a whole other strategy. So there's always situations that are very particular to a company, but there are also very well-established norms around how to compensate, how to transact using equity for different things that you need. In terms of investors demanding things, here's a trick. When you build your investment package, it should have your investment documents in there. Here's another thing I kind of learned and didn't expect to learn, but everyone uses term sheets, and I can understand why they're cheap and you can just throw them together and all the rest of it. But the thing is, investors think of term sheets as negotiable. If you draft your full investment documents and put them in your folder, it's massive. It blows my mind the extent to which people will stop doing things like trying to negotiate around things like valuation and terms. Because the signal is that you've kind of made up your mind about that and it's all down there in your investment package. If you're out there with a one-page term sheet that didn't cost you any money to create and you didn't have to put a whole bunch of thought into figuring out the details, everyone knows that you can, it's kind of like you haven't totally made up your mind and you're just floating something like it's kind of an idea, you know? So what I would say is if you feel comfortable that you've done a good job creating a defensible valuation and that you're clear on the terms that you want and what's available for different levels of investment relative to board seats and all the rest of it, draft your investment documents, put that stuff in there, and unless a lead comes in who's prepared to drop money into your company and support you driving the remainder of the raise, that's the deal. Take it or leave it.
But for those norms though, so seed base, board seats, approval of hire, what do you see out there, norms?
Okay, so angel raises, seed raises often don't have a lead, so there's no requirement usually that no one comes in demanding a board seat. What I would say is look at your investors. You do want investor representation in governance, especially if those investors are in a convertible position because they have no other voice in the company, and figure out strategically what is the best for your company. Someone might give you $20,000 but just be like a perfect addition to your board, and someone might give you $250,000 and be clueless and useless to you on your board. So be strategic about, it's not just about the money. In terms of like, if you're trying to go out and bring executive talent in or board talent in based on domain expertise, access to capital, pre-funded at the seed stage, you're going to be giving up a point of equity in your company for those people, but post-funded, when you're in between seed and Series A, it starts to move down into like quarter, half a point, and after that, you don't even deal with percentages. People get sort of a number of shares, and always put people on a vesting agreement, even at the advisory and board level, if you're giving equity. And I usually vest those agreements over 2 years for advisory or board support.
I'm happy to say that I do have a nibbler now. I do have someone interested.
Okay.
And we're going down to do the farm next week. We've not talked at all about valuation methodologies. We've not talked about going concern value. We've not talked about capitalization rates. We've only talked about the horrible management team that I have down there and our strategy to exit. He's on board with that, but at some point, Sara, we're going to talk about dilution of my position, and how to value my position so we know what that means for him. What do you recommend for how to value a launched business that's only 6 months old and has nominal revenue today? How do we value that?
Yeah, so valuation is one of these funny things. It's like, I can never totally tell what's going on in my brain if I'm just like feeling my way through to something that feels right, or using a lot of experience, using different valuation models to kind of come up with a firmer number. But what I would say is that when you have, I know a little bit about your situation, and when you have a situation like that that's complex, it's almost like a ground up valuation. Like, you've got to look at the realities of the ground, on the ground, what people are prepared to do, prepared to give up, what kind of capital is needed to stabilize the business, what are the dependencies in terms of some people coming in or some people going away. And then it's more like structuring a deal, the way that you would think about structuring a real estate deal or dealing with a settlement in a lawsuit, where you're just kind of structuring, you're trying to structure something that is the least painful and does the most benefit for all of the parties involved. So it's a slightly different approach. I think your experience as an attorney will very well inform the process that you're going to have to go through in terms of figuring out how to manage that deal.
Thank you so much. So it's just fantastic, really. Thank you.